Hello, you've tuned to this week's episode of Next Steps Forward, and I'm your host, Chris Meek. As always, it's an honor to have you with us. Next Steps Forward is committing to helping others achieve more than ever while experiencing greater personal empowerment and well-being. This year is the 25th observance of the September 11 terrorist attacks. I encourage you to visit the 9/11 Legacy Foundation website at the 911legacy.org. That's the 911legacy.org. And to raise awareness about that important date in America's history, I'll be hosting a number of guests in the months ahead who lived through the attacks and or have been motivated by the memories of that day and its aftermath to act in the service of others. Our very special guest today is Clarence Singleton, who served 20 years on the Fire Department of New York with Engine Company 218. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, Clarence was not scheduled to be anywhere near the World Trade Center. And in fact, he had retired a year earlier. So please stay with us for his inspiring story. Clarence Singleton, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Chris. Thank you.
So Clarence and I met about a year or so ago on something else that Clarence is working on, and we'll get to that later in the show. But I had the privilege and honor of meeting Clarence last fall. I was asked to moderate a panel on 9/11 down in Washington. And unbeknownst to me, Clarence was one of the panelists. And so you're in for a treat. He's a great man, a great American. And so we're blessed to have you here today, Clarence. And so I know you're on the road. So thanks for taking some time, especially as you're digging out of the snowy blizzard we've had here the last couple of days in the Northeast. So
you're quite welcome. Thank you.
As we talk about September 11th, 2001, it's hard to believe, but true, that more than 100 million Americans are either too young to remember that day or are born after it happened. And obviously that number grows every day. So I'm going to provide some brief context first. On that morning, 19 terrorists from the Middle East hijacked 4 commercial flights. At 8:46 a.m., they crashed American Airlines Flight 11 into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. The first FDNY alarms between 8:48 and 8:50 a.m. mobilized the first response. FDNY Chief Peter Gansey ordered a 5th alarm at 8:57, which triggered the responses from Brooklyn, Queens, and Bronx companies, including Engine 218 and Letter Company 105, which were in the same firehouse. By 9 a.m., 21 engine companies and 9 letter companies had already been dispatched. The second plane struck the South Tower at 9:03 a.m. The South Tower collapsed at 9:59 a.m. At 10:28 a.m., the North Tower collapsed. 343 FDNY firefighters were among the 2,753 innocent lives that were murdered at Ground Zero that day. It was not only the largest loss of life in FDNY history, it was the largest loss of emergency responders in U.S. history. So, Clarence, I have to start with the last thing I mentioned in the open because I think most people would be shocked to hear that a retired firefighter would respond to such a deadly situation without even being called. But what surprised me even more was you weren't alone, because even though an exact count isn't available, a number of retired FDNY, NYPD, EMS, and Port Authority personnel rushed the scene of the Twin Towers that day. You and others who rushed to Ground Zero or reported firehouses were integrated informally into recovery operations, firehouse support roles, equipment transportation, and family support. The same was true for NYPD, EMS, and Port Authority retirees. Where were you when the first plane struck, and how did you hear about the attack? Were you watching TV? Did someone call you?
I was in my vehicle. I had a part-time job. As a matter of fact, I had the job for like 15 years while I was active in the fire department. And I was out this particular morning getting ready to go do some inspections. I heard over the radio in my vehicle that a plane struck tower. So initially I just saw a small plane struck tower. Then I heard a second announcement, second plane struck tower. So that's when I sprung into action. Firefighting was still in my blood. Still is, as a matter of fact.
And you still fit in your uniform, which I was very impressed by because there's no way I could have done that. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. You were retired, as I mentioned, but you immediately headed to Ground Zero. What was going on inside you at that moment, and did you hesitate at all?
No, there was absolutely no hesitation. Chris, it took me a while to come to a conclusion to figure this out. But I just wondered, well, Clarence, why would you run into a burning building to try to help strangers, people you don't know? And I came to the conclusion it's for the love of people. I love people, so, and I didn't want to see anyone suffer. And if I can get there and lend a hand, it would be great. And I think that it's still a part of me. It's always been there. And that's one of the reasons I joined the Marine Corps as well, and fought in Vietnam, so. Mm-hmm.
And we'll get to that
That's
shortly.
one of the ways I give back is, yeah.
No, please continue.
Yeah, I said I'm suffering now from post-traumatic stress and depression, a lot of medical conditions because my function at the World Trade Center collapsed. But I still go out and try to pass what I know on to other people so it may help them. And I think that's what life is all about. It's not just about Clarence, Clarence, Clarence. I got to share what I know and pass it on to others. As a matter of fact, I'm in Boston right now. I live down in Virginia, and I came up here to Boston Saturday to speak to a group of at the Foreign Veterans Post in Revere, Boston, Revere, Massachusetts. I'm sorry.
Well, if you're going to be in Boston, you have to pronounce it correctly. Up there, they call it Revere. So we'll practice your R's while you're there.
Oh. Got it.
So you talk about a couple of things here. So you were retired at the time. You went down to ground zero. How were you able to get in there without being, an active duty firefighter?
Well, after I heard the report in my vehicle that a plane struck the tower, I went back to my house and put on a fire department T-shirt similar to the one I'm wearing, and a pair of jeans and a pair of boots, and I had no problem getting into the scene. I still had my badge and my ID card, so it was no problem getting in at all. I was just wondering how I was going to get there. So I decided to leave my car in Brooklyn because I worked in Manhattan for probably about 16 years, and I knew traffic was going to be horrendous. So I took the train over to the city so I can make sure that I get there, and it worked out.
It's one thing to see disaster on TV or hear about it on the radio, and quite another to face it head on in real time like you did. You saw a lot of fires and carnage during your career, but what went through your mind when you caught your first glimpse of the Twin Towers burning?
Yeah, well, I wondered how could something like this happen in America? It was really mind-boggling, and it took a while for me to really grasp what was going on. And I saw the debris on the ground and at first my mind just wouldn't let me perceive that a tower, one of the World Trade Center towers, had collapsed, because I saw this big jagged piece of metal, and then my mind told me that's a piece of work of art because I hadn't been down in that area in a while. And then I realized, no, it's the actual collapse of the World Trade Center. And that was the South Tower that had collapsed. The North Tower collapsed while I was there working with other firefighters that were coming in from home. So yeah, it was quite an experience. As a matter of fact, Chris, people have asked me to compare my stay in Vietnam to the collapse of the World Trade Center. When things happen and when tragedies happen at home, it cuts deeper than when you're fighting abroad, And in Vietnam, I saw a lot of tragedies, but it was over a period of time. But at the World Trade Center, it was, this happened at once, 343 firefighters perished, at one time, so that's really something to deal with.
How do you put that into context for someone who hasn't been to New York City and isn't familiar with the cityscape and the enormity of its buildings?
Yeah, it's really amazing. As a matter of fact, my wife now, we've gone down there and she just can't get the scale of it. And my stepdaughter, we've gone down. And as a matter of fact, we went up to the new building, I can't think of the name now. I recall this turtle from the trauma at the collapse also. But they were amazed by it, and also to even think that people had to jump, from the World Trade Center building that was as tall as that, 110 stories. So some people are just amazed by it. And even now when I share my story, man, people are just amazed about what happened there. Another group that also, I shared a lot of schools, and the kids, man, our kids, they are very interested in what happened at the World Trade Center. Because as you know, I'm with the Freedom Flag Foundation. We're trying to keep the memory of September alive by going into schools and teaching to our children. And they follow me and my wife out to the parking lot, sometimes asking questions.
That's good to hear. That's actually great to hear. So, you talked about your PTSD a bit, and I'll trade some more stories with you for mine. But, how long did it take you to go back to ground zero after 9/11?
Oh, I went back. I had an interview. Some reporter, well, actually, a lot of reporters asked me to come over to do interviews. So it was shortly after I went over, but it's amazingly, I felt the presence when I was there. It seemed, I guess, my friends know that I'm here, because I knew and had worked with a lot of guys that perished. We lost some really great guys. And the chief of department, as you read, Chief Gansey, and he was a sweetheart, And these guys would actually do anything for you. I've seen them do amazing things to rescue people that they didn't know, total strangers, and they loved it, Mm-hmm.
And I just want to highlight, I think that's something that people don't know about FDNY and NYPD as well, but in particular on this day, FDNY,
Yeah.
where they just did it because it's in their blood, it's their DNA. And you mentioned Chief Gansey. I've had the honor of getting to know his son, Chris, who was in
Yes.
finance, and because of his father perishing that day, left a professional career in finance and is now a battalion chief in FDNY. And so people always hear about it and see TV shows and movies, but it is a different breed. It's a different DNA. It's the family business. It's what you do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so to hear that is no surprise. And you talk about the magnitude of the day and the size of those buildings. You think about one building being 110 stories, but there were two.
Yes.
And to have them collapse, you just can't comprehend the magnitude of that. And you briefly mentioned about, people jumping because that was their best option. And I've talked about it on my show here. And that was actually it's the first chapter of my first book, which I wrote during COVID, because that was my therapy for my PTSD. And that's one of my
Okay.
lasting memories of that day. I've got two very specific memories. One is first responders rushing into the towers while everyone's going the other way. But the first one are people jumping because that was their best option. And to think
Yeah.
that someone
Yeah.
had to jump 85, 90, 95 stories because that was their best option
Mm-hmm.
is shocking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Chris, when the North Tower collapsed, myself and I think it was two other firefighters were extinguishing car fires, ambulance fires in the perimeter. And we heard this loud bang, like something let go. And we stared at each other. And it happened again, bang. So instinct told us that the tower was collapsing. So we ran, and I'm assuming ran about 30 feet or so, and I fell. And I had a right shoulder dislocation. And I was trying to get up off to the ground as I was skidding along because I knew I was in the collapse zone. To be completely out of the collapse zone, you need to be a distance away equal to a height and a half of the building. And 110-story building, I knew I was nowhere near that. But I was on my hands and knees, and I was waiting to die. But it was calm. It was so peaceful. It was unbelievable. And the only thing I thought about, we lost 4 firefighters earlier during the year. A wall collapsed on him. So I said to myself, this wall is going to crush me just like it did those guys. So if that's any consolation to people jumping, I felt no fear. It was just, I'm going home. That's it. As a matter of fact, I used to ask my friends afterwards, am I dead or alive? And they would tell me, Clarence, we assure you, you are alive. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't sure. Yep.
And how did that weigh on you mentally after the fact?
Oh, yeah, it was, my friend at the time told me that I didn't realize it. She said, Clarence, all you were doing for a long period of time was sitting and staring at the walls. I remember after I relocated to Virginia, I stayed in New York about 5 years after the collapse, and I just had to get out. It was too noisy, too crowded. And I was sitting on my couch in my TV room in Virginia. I don't remember the exact times, but let's say it was like 10 in the morning. And the next thing I knew, it was like 2 in the afternoon. I was like, and I didn't fall asleep. I was still sitting. I said, what happened to the time in between? But that matches what my friend told me back in New York. She said, you just sit there and stare at the walls. But I didn't realize it. And finally, I was a combat Marine, so, we could handle anything. So I was handling it, being sarcastic. But finally, the police department ordered all of their guys in for help. And I saw at the bus stops in Brooklyn, I saw the signs urging the guys to go in. So that gave me the ability to go into the VA hospital in Brooklyn to talk to some therapists. And that kind of got me back on my feet by going into therapy and sharing.
I mentioned the number of retired first responders continue to volunteer for days, weeks, and even months after 9/11. What did you do in the days that followed, and why did you do it?
What I did was, first of all, I think I went to the hospital that afternoon, and the doctor had to order me to go to get some medication from the drugstore. But I really basically just stayed at home and I watched TV. And I had landed just prior to, I think it was the Friday or Thursday before September 11th, the collapse. I landed a job in Manhattan as a fire safety director. So after the collapse, I think it was the very next day or maybe the second day, I reported for my job with my arm still in really pain. And so I worked there for actually a month before I went into for surgery. But I got active right away, and after surgery, that was another story. I couldn't sleep. I think it was about 3 months until I went down to North Carolina. My son graduated from college, and I woke up the next morning and ran into the house. Hey, I slept all night. I couldn't believe it. But I kind of stayed active as best I could because I knew that I couldn't just lay around the house and sulk all the time, So I started, as a matter of fact, I spoke to some friends, and that was another issue because I returned one of my friends' calls, can't remember who it was, and he said, Clarence, you called me yesterday. We talked about that. And that's when I realized also that my recall was terrible from the collapse, and it still is. As a matter of fact, some of the therapists told me that my brain just want to shut down. It's had enough, But I still try to stay active. As a matter of fact, Chris, I told you I came here to Boston to speak Saturday night to some veterans. Man, with post-traumatic stress and depression, it takes a lot for me to get going, with the anxieties, but I still do it because I know other people need to hear what I've gone through, so help lift them up, Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that for a minute. So knowing what it's done to you, obviously personally, mentally, physically, do you do it because you want others to learn about it and to be more open about what they're going through? Do you do it because it helps you personally, or is it something else, or all of the above?
All of the above. Well, there's a store and this has happened many times. I'll just give you one example. There's a store in my neighborhood in Midlothian, Virginia. I used to frequent the store almost every day. And there was this young lady, the clerk, she would smile at me. So I said to myself, old man, you still got it. But one day I went in and she said, if I write you a letter, would you read it? And I said, of course. And finally she gave me a letter. And in essence, the letter read that she wasn't able to ride in cars. She had jumped out of cars, moving cars. But she said, after reading my story, she probably read my book. I have a book out, The Heart of a Hero. She said that she was actually able to ride to the beach with her parents. So that's why I keep doing it, and I've heard that many, many times how my story has helped people. So I keep doing it. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to keep doing it until the day I die.
As a very young man, you're part of another watershed event in American history when you served, as you mentioned, as a combat Marine in Vietnam. Young men who wanted to avoid being drafted into the Army often enlisted in the Navy or the Air Force. Not many people chose to join the Marines because the Marines were also being sent to Vietnam. Is it fair to assume that you volunteered for the Marines because you aspired to be a Marine, or was there something else?
All of the above. I
I didn't mean to give you a test today. Sorry.
no problem. No problem at all. As a matter of fact, for years and years, and it's true, I said I went into Marine Corps because I wanted to fight for the country, which is true. And I wanted to be a Marine. That's true. And because in my opinion, the Marine Corps was one of the best, and I wanted to join the best. Years later, probably after the World Trade Center, when I went into therapy, I discovered that I grew up in a very poor family in South Carolina. So the back of the bus, I was in the back of the bus days, and I worked in fields, so I felt less than. So if I go into the Marine Corps doing something tough, I am somebody. But I don't need that validation today, Clarence. I pretty much know who I am. Mm-hmm. But I think with all of us, there's a lot of stuff goes on psychological below the level of consciousness, and that's what happened to me. But it's okay.
You were wounded, you were wounded in a rocket attack that killed 2 of your fellow Marines, and you received the Purple Heart. Combat and being wounded certainly must have changed you emotionally. Did you feel yourself hardening, adapting, or shutting down parts of yourself just to survive? And how did your Vietnam experience shape the person you became in the years after the war?
Oh yeah, the war definitely changed me. I was a nice kid growing up in South Carolina, but after the war, here's an example. Just like I was, a new Marine came over, and after a couple of weeks, after he loosened up a bit, he said, "Clarence, when I first met you, I thought you were a wild man." That gave you an idea of my appearance. And so I had changed, definitely changed. And even when I got back to the States, and also I think people misjudge, sometimes people think because he fought in the war, he don't have it anymore, he's lost it, he's crazy, this kind of stuff, which isn't true. And of course, I came back with post-traumatic stress and things like that is, you see things like that, and our bodies aren't meant to handle things like that. So that's like an overflow, So, but eventually, everybody started respecting me again and realizing that I'm not the insane person that they thought I was. And I had to do some adjusting also because I kind of had to feed into that to let them know, hey, I'm just as sane as the next person, But there's one thing about our military that I think should be improved is you can be in a war zone one day and back home amongst civilians the next day. So, and with all that hostility, and I think that's why a lot of veterans get in trouble because we haven't been, I should say, deprogrammed or, put back in society with any information on what you've gone through. I think some of that has changed. The military's working on that now, but when I came through, as a matter of fact, it was traumatic stress. Us Vietnam veterans worked on that and got that to become a reality. Because before that, it was like, hey, you shell shock, and it's crazy,
Right. Well, it's interesting you talk about transitioning from being on the front lines to coming back home. I recently had a guest on comparing same concept of World War II to Vietnam and then the global war on terror, where in World War II, when the troops came back home, they were at sea together for weeks on end, coming back from Northern Europe to the US. So that's when they got to decompress, they got to talk to each other, not be scared, not be afraid, not say, I've got your 6 in a foxhole. And so that was them sort of slowly reacclimating just amongst themselves. But to your point, today, you come home, you land at whatever Air Force base your plane lands at, and you go back to your everyday life the next day. Like that transition cannot be easy. I just can't begin to imagine what it's like.
Mm-hmm. In our case, also the Vietnam veterans, we couldn't talk about it to civilians. We'd be ridiculed. As a matter of fact, looking for work was difficult for me. I could hardly find a job. I lived in Brooklyn at the time. I used to look in the periodicals for ads for work, and I couldn't find anything. So I went into Manhattan, walking door to door looking for work, and no one would give me a job because I fought in Vietnam. And finally, I went into a bank in Lower Manhattan, and the personal office gave me an interview, and he said, "Okay, go into the doctor's office, which was on a premises." And when I went into his office, he was at his desk, and he didn't look around at me. He just said, "Strip and sit on the examination table." So I did, and when he turned around, he saw the scars. He said, "Where did you get those scars?" And I said, "I got them fighting in Vietnam. I'm a Marine." So he said, "Get off of the table." So I did, and I was getting dressed, and I said to myself, "Well, I'm being kicked out again." So he said, "If you're good enough to go to Vietnam, you're good enough to work here." And that was a turning point in my life. And at that bank, I became a supervisor, and I worked there until, well, when I left, I went into the police department for a little while in the civilian side of it. And then from there, I went into the fire department.
That is a great success story. So we need to hear more things like that. One last question before we go to the break. How did the resilience you built in Vietnam shape the firefighter you became? And was there a particular fire or moment in the job before 9/11 that tested or strengthened your resilience in a new way?
Oh, yeah. You know, the fire department itself, from my point of view, the officers love guys that have been in the military because we're disciplined. You ask us to do something, we do it right away, no hesitation. My boss would ask me to do something, that's done. And as a matter of fact, that attitude, when I was promoted to lieutenant, it can be political, getting a firehouse to settle into, because you want to settle down because you don't know the guys are in a fire condition, you can't see, it's smoky, and you want to know their capabilities. But every chief officer that came out to the fire academy when I was training asked me, "What house do you want to go to? What firehouse you want to be assigned to?" And I told, and I got that particular house because I did everything that I was asked to do. Also, Chris, in Vietnam, I used to volunteer. In the military, they said, "Don't volunteer for anything," but I used to volunteer to do things and on my own initiative. And I saw the sergeant staring, looking at me one day, and he said, I had a patrol. And he said, "I don't want you to go out there." He said, "You're always doing the right things." So he took me off of the patrol and put me in a foxhole in the back of that compound. Those guys that went on the patrol, none of them came back in on their own power. None of them made it back in. So by doing right things, it saved my life. So I've carried that attitude all through the fire department, and it has paid off. I'm telling you, I reap rewards from doing right things I'm supposed to do anyway. So, I took an oath.
And no matter how hard it is, just do the right thing. It's never easy.
Right.
We've been talking to Clarence Singleton, a true American hero. We'll be right back after a short break. Please stay with us. We are back. I'm Chris Meek, host of Next Steps Forward. And my guest today is Clarence Singleton, who served 20 years on the Fire Department of New York. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, Clarence Singleton was not scheduled to be anywhere near the World Trade Center because he retired at the rank of lieutenant a year earlier, but that didn't stop him from rushing to the scene to respond to the terrorist attack that claimed 2,977 innocent lives at 3 attack sites here in the U.S. Like many first responders and volunteers, Clarence, you mentioned before that you struggled with post-traumatic stress, depression, and survivor's guilt, and went through a long journey of healing. You credit therapy and support from fellow veterans for helping you recover. When did you realize you needed help beyond what you could manage on your own?
I realized that at one point my daughter was at my house, and she was sitting in the window typing on a computer, and it was at night, and she had the blinds were open. So I asked her, I said, "That doesn't bother you sitting here?" She said, "No, I feel fine." Myself at night, sitting in front of a window with the blinds open. No. There's a sniper out there. So I just can't do it. So that made me realize there is something that's not right. At one point, even prior to that, I grew up in South Carolina. After the Marine Corps, I went to New York, and then, of course, I went back to South Carolina to visit. Driving down the trees on the side of the highway, my mind would just revert back to the jungle when I saw trees. And as a matter of fact, when I see dust now in tall buildings, it reverts to the World Trade Center. So at that time, I realized that something was not right. So I went in Manhattan, I went to the Veterans Administration and I explained it to the therapist, and she gave me a yellow pad to write some notes on, which I did. And she said, "Come back in 6 months." So I said, forget about it. 6 months, I'm not coming back. So I just kept dealing with and living with post-traumatic stress and depression and not realizing what was going on. As a matter of fact, Chris, when I used to ride the fire trucks before I was an officer, when I was an officer, of course, you ride in a cab. But when I'm on the back step, during rainy days, because of the monsoon seasons in Vietnam, my mind will revert back to Vietnam. So I would sit there and tears would come to my eyes, of course. And I didn't make the connection then that it's all because of Vietnam. But then I started tying all the little strings together, and I realized I was having a problem. And through therapy, I realized it's nothing to be ashamed of. I think the healthiest of us go in for help when we know that's something off. And it's one of the best things that I ever did. And I talk about it openly when I go out and share my story with people, because that could help them. And, I think that my wounds, physical and the ones that are invisible, became a platform, and they didn't stop my life. It just reshaped it. Mm-hmm. So, and that's what I do to these days. I just keep sharing with people, and hopefully they'll gain from it. And I think they do, man, because when I shared Saturday night, I have never gotten so many hugs and so many photos taken, and people you can tell that they were actually honored.
Well, and I love to hear that. And I know that, you mentioned earlier in the show, World War I and World War II, they called it shell shock.
Yeah.
Vietnam, when you guys came back, it was not the best of welcomes, to say the least. Global war and terror, a little bit different. But, was it difficult for you to accept the idea of therapy, big, proud, brave Marine, or was it something that you realized, I need to embrace this to, as you mentioned, reshape my life?
Oh, no, it took me a while to get used to the fact. As a matter of fact, not only me, my girlfriend, we were at a family reunion or something like that. I think a lot of us family members were together. And my ex said something that kind of made me look weak, like Clarence is getting therapy or something like that. And my son said, "Oh, no, he's a Marine," But I had to let him know that I was in therapy at the time. And I explained to him that it's nothing to be, ashamed about. I think that resilience is not the absence of pain; it's the decision to keep walking with it, and that's what I do. So if anyone asks me these days, I'll let them know. Yeah, I don't go out and say, "Hey, I got post-traumatic stress and depression." But if they come to me and ask, let them know.
You're not wearing a T-shirt or a bumper sticker in your car?
No, not yet. PTSD.
I also know that you're a man of faith. Is that something that played into this as well, or is that just something that kind of came after the fact?
I have, even growing up in South Carolina, I remember going to like Sunday school, and I've always believed in doing right things. I forgot about it. I hear my mother's voice and do this, don't fight, treat people respectfully, and all of this stuff. And always wear clean underwear in case you have to go to the hospital
Go to the
abruptly.
hospital. My grandmother always said that.
But yeah, my faith anchors me, and I also, Chris, I believe that we grow through things. I think that everything that happens to me is allowed, and when I grow through it, then I should take that and pass it on to help other people that may be going through the same situation. Mm-hmm. And I also believe that service, if you go through hardships and you keep it to yourself, it weighs you down. But if you turn that service and help others with it, it lifts them up. So that's what I try to do. Just take my hardships, pass it on, so I can lift others up. And one day, this is all going to be over for me. I'm quite sure that when it's time, when the man upstairs said, "Okay, Clarence, I want you to feel 100% all of the time," then it'll happen. But still, as I'll say again, even though I'm not 100% all the time, I still do what I need to do. One foot in front of the other.
And maybe as a follow-up to that, what would you say to someone listening right now, whether as a veteran, a first responder, or really anyone who is struggling, but they're hesitant to seek help?
From my personal experience, I would say just go. Don't think about it. It's one of the best things that I have ever done for myself. And in my book, I think I mentioned something about suffering in silence. And I also mentioned a while ago that when I hold on to things like that, it weighs me down. But when I find out what's going on with me and pass it on with others, it lifts them up. And some of us may be in denial, like I was. And I don't think denial is a bad thing, but it acts like a buffer against my soul until I'm ready to let myself know what I already know, because I believe that we know the answer. We know that something is wrong, and we just need to take an action to get back on track. But like I'll say again, it's one of the best things I have ever done. And I still, like I mentioned, I suffer from post-traumatic stress, and I still get angry, but I have to use a little in my head. I said, "Clarence, think it through," because post-traumatic stress, you can become angry. So I just said, even my wife, I said, "Let her be right, Clarence. It's okay. How important is it? Don't sweat the small things." And that's another thing, Chris. By going through hardships, it's taught me how to be a better person, how to treat others as I would want to be treated. Life is just, I tell you, I was doing something, it wasn't bad. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I was doing the right thing, but for the wrong reason. And I came in touch with that. I said, "Oh," because I have post-traumatic stress disorder, I kind of keep an eye on myself, like, "Clarence, why did you do that? Why did you say that to this person? Why?" Like this morning, I went down to have breakfast in a hotel, and I wasn't rude to this lady, but my wife spoke to her, and I didn't speak, because a lot of people in the hotel don't speak. But then I said, "Clarence, your wife spoke to her, but why didn't you?" Because I was being a little snarty. But next time I'll speak. So that's how I do it. Keep moving.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Exactly. So you've mentioned your book a few times, The Heart of a Hero, and thanks to you, I've got a copy right here. Where can people find your book?
It's online. It's in barnesandnoble.com or all of their websites. As a matter of fact, it used to be on the shelf in Barnes and Noble, but I think they've removed it. But it's online, and when I order, I reorder, and pass them out. As a matter of fact, I'm a terrible salesman. I give more away than I actually sell, and
but you're giving yourself the royalty, so that's okay.
Yeah, I'm
It's
the
going right back in your pocket. So again, the title of the book is The Heart of a Hero: My Journey from Vietnam to the World Trade Center Bombing to the 9/11 Tragedy. You've said also that talking about 9/11 is a calling because you've insisted that we, quote, we can't forget. One of the ways that you make sure that others don't forget 9/11 or learn about it for the first time is through your work on the board of the Freedom Flag Foundation. How'd you get connected with the Freedom Flag Foundation, and what's its mission?
Let me give you a mission first. Our mission is to become a national stimulus remembrance for September 11. And I was Ann Knight, a teacher at Cosby High School in Lothian. I used to go to her class quite often to speak to the kids, just about life and military and fire department and what happened on September 11. And one day I was speaking, and another lady was there that I didn't recognize. And after I finished talking to the kids, she said, "You're smiling." I said, "Yeah." So she said, "We would like for you to join the board of the Freedom Flag Foundation, board of directors." And I thought about it, and I said, "Yeah, that'd be a good thing." And we went to Richmond, the Senate, and the House, and we spoke to them, and they approved it unanimously. And then Virginia came it became one of Virginia's official flag of remembrance of September 11. I have some recall from the trauma at the World Trade Center, so sometimes I try to search for where I'm going. And then California came in, and they joined us, and Delaware, and other states are coming in now. So it's going to be a big thing eventually. Mm-hmm.
And there's a big goal this year to make it the national flag of remembrance. And so John Riley and others on your board are really trying to press that forward. And so, good luck with that. And obviously let us know if there's anything we can do to help you with the lawmakers. And as that moves forward, once the bill is formally pushed through or proposed, I will definitely let our listeners and viewers know what the bill number is so they can write their congressman and senator to encourage them to vote and pass that. So more to come on that. And maybe another follow-up to that is, how does the foundation educate people and preserve the memories of 9/11? And what does it mean to you when you see younger generations respond to these stories and lessons?
It's a great feeling, really, absolutely. As a matter of fact, this Friday, after school, I have a group of young ladies coming over to my house so that they can listen to me talk about September 11th. I don't know. Yeah, you've seen a little piece of my living room because sometimes when I log on, I'm sitting there. But in my living room, there's no furniture. I have all artifacts on the walls from Vietnam and the fire department, and every reporter in Virginia has been there reviewing, talking to me about it. And so it does my heart good to see our young kids involved, And there's a little young kid at my church. Oh man, he must be about 12 now. And he loved my fire department paraphernalia. And I always buy him a t-shirt and a fire cap. But he loved to hear me talk about the World Trade Center. And even my pastor at the church I used to attend prior to COVID, I would talk to where they have like maybe Cub Scouts or stuff like that. And they loved it. They loved hearing about the World Trade Center. But one day I shared from the pulpit, the pastor had me come up and say something about Vietnam. And afterwards, I was in the hall, and this little boy came up. He was about waist high. He looked up at me. He said, "You mean you've been shelled before?" So I said, "Yes." He said, "Wow." It's so cute.
It's little things we remember, right?
Oh, yeah. Wow.
And then just lastly, and maybe most importantly, how can people get involved with the Freedom Flag Foundation?
Yeah, just go to freedomflagfoundation.org, and all of the information is there. And you'll see yours truly when you just go to the board members. There's photos of all the board members and a little statement, but freedomflagfoundation.org. and we'd love to have you.
And I've done some work with you guys over the last 6 or 8 months now, and it's a great organization. And I cannot encourage our listeners and viewers enough to go get involved, especially those in education, whether it be elementary, high school, at the college level. There's a ton of information there, and it's something for not only this generation, but future generations to learn from. So again, Clarence, thanks to you and John Riley and the others, Richard Melito, for the work that you're doing there. So thank you.
Yeah, you're quite welcome.
And Clarence, we've talked about moments of history and loss, but life doesn't end there. After everything you've lived through, by 2001, what surprises you most about the way your life has unfolded in these ensuing 25 years?
Oh, it's a good question. And I have a real good answer for you. As a matter of fact, I was just thinking about it. Because of yourself, becoming involved with the Freedom Flag Foundation, because I was on the panel at the Omni Hotel in DC back in November. I met 2 guys there, and they are powerful guys. And my chance of spreading the word about what happened to me on September 11 and the Freedom Flag Foundation has expanded. That's why I'm here in Boston, because I spoke to some veterans, and it keeps growing. And on his website, man, I had like 33,000 views. And so those are people I'm saying, wow, information is getting out there. And one of the other guy, Mike, his website have over 400,000 views, So, and I keep thinking my life is expanding, it's growing. And that's because of people like you. You're one of the guys. Here I am on your podcast, So,
So now you're an influencer.
The word is getting out there. Yeah, and that's what we want, We want the word out there, Chris.
No, we do, and we need it, unfortunately, more than ever.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What was it like to revisit those life-changing moments from Vietnam and 9/11 while you were writing your book?
It was difficult, and what I did was, because I have recall problems from the collapse on September 11, I carried didn't have the digital recorders back then. They had the one with the old tapes. I carried one with me, and every time I got a thought, I would pop it into the recorder. And I did that because I know, even to this day, I have the ability to stuff. When it's painful, I don't want to hear it. Cut it off. So I recorded myself when it happened just so I would have it, because I know me, I'd push it on the back burner. I don't want to go there. But, and I know I need to. I need to go there. And so that helped me a lot just by sharing it. And I still suffer from it. Someone asked me here in Boston over the weekend, it was 2 guys, 2 veterans. They said, Clarence, by sharing all of this stuff that happened to you, did it all go away? So I said, no. And he said, same with us. I've heard that once you share it, half of it gets better, or whatever, however you say it. But with me, it's still there. I just keep putting one foot in front of the other, because I believe that there's a purpose in life. That's why I'm here. That's why I wrote my book, And I think all of us have a purpose in life. We just have to find it and figure out what that is.
Were you surprised by any of your own memories when you were writing the book, or did you discover anything new about yourself?
Yeah, Chris, I discover things about myself regularly, because what I do is I observe myself, When I say something, I ask myself, why did you say that, And also, when I wrote my book, I didn't realize at the time, because I used to not want to share certain things. So I was able to put some really sentimental stuff out there, some emotional issues out there. So I realized that even though I didn't tell you, but I was the most decorated Marine when I graduated from Paris Island. I was the valedictorian. But in spite of that, I can still be soft and caring. Because there's that time I can put on, like right now, if I put on my Marine Corps uniform, I'd probably get stern, and that tough walk again. But yeah, I made a lot of discoveries about myself. And I do that quite often because I observe myself, And also I can take constructive criticism from other people who are observing me. They can tell me, hey, Clarence, you're doing that. I say that. All right. not that I need what they're saying to validate myself, but it's good to see what they think of me. And my little granddaughter, 4-year-old granddaughter, she comes to me for everything she wants. She don't ask the others. So I said, oh, she sees me as a great granddad. You know? She hadn't seen me in a few days. She saw me on video last night. She went, hey, granddaddy. So
that's what we're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
But that's good from a self-reflection perspective, because first of all, you're extremely humble. You just mentioned there for the first time about as the most decorated Marine from Paris Island. And that's how I perceive you, as a very humble, gentle giant, for lack of a better phrase, who you said a few times on the show that you're here for a purpose. You have meaning, you have a cause, and you have found your calling, and you're doing it in multiple facets, whether it's, as a Marine veteran, as a grandfather, as you just mentioned, as a firefighter, as a 9/11 survivor, all of that in one. And so by sharing these messages in your voice and letting others know it's okay to not be okay, you're helping current and future generations fight through whatever battles or demons they may be fighting with. And so I thank you for that.
Good, thank you. You are quite welcome.
So Clarence, we're almost at the end of our fascinating conversation. So one final question. When you think about 9/11 today, nearly a quarter century later, with an entire generation of adults who weren't alive then, what lessons from that day do you think are most important for future generations?
I think that it should teach us to be prepared. There are warriors, in my opinion, they're warriors. And I believe I have the warrior type mentality because I always tried to be prepared. And I think, and also, I think what happened at the World Trade Center and other things, I have to be careful of how I see people. And I'm talking about the people that perish at the World Trade Center. Because I'm saying that because sometimes when people, like we used to say in the old days, give me my flowers while I live, treat people with respect, And so that's what I try to do. And like I said, all of us have a purpose in life. And I may not agree with someone, but I can still treat them with respect. So I think that those are the things that we should, at least I should carry from that, and which I try to do. And I try, like I mentioned before, I try to take constant looks at myself. And I've gone in for therapy too, so I can get someone else's opinion. Even good therapists go in for checkups. They should if they don't. So.
Clarence Singleton, again, a true great American hero, and somebody I'm proud to call friend. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for your time.
You're quite welcome. I appreciate it being here. Thank you, Chris.
It was an honor having you with us. And thank you to our audience for joining us. I'm Chris Meek. We're out of time. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Until then, stay safe.